Welcome to the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. I'm Melissa Lieberman, a fellow IC and business coach. On this podcast, I teach you to become a consistently booked independent consultant without becoming a pushy salesperson or working 24/7. If I can do it, you can too. Listen on to find out how. Welcome to episode 254 of the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. This is Melissa Lieberman, and today we're talking about how much is enough. How much is enough business development for you as a consultant? This is a super important question to answer, and I find that it's very rare for consultants to know the answer to this. And I also want to highlight for you that not knowing the answer of this question, how much is enough business development, can be very costly for you in your business. And we'll talk more about there's some obvious costs, but some actual not so obvious costs that you're probably paying without realizing it. So that's why we're here today. I'm so happy you're here. Today, we're talking about this question of how much business development is enough, because this is a question that's asked and rarely answered. Kind of one of those questions that we have in our minds that we ask and we just don't answer. It's like this open loop. And as a result, you might be in the camp of consultants who feel like you're never doing enough. This is so common, right? I'm not doing enough. This constant sort of background noise running that I'm not doing enough, I'm not doing enough, I'm not doing enough. We literally don't even know what enough is. It's so draining. You might be on the other side, which is you have an idea of what you should be doing from a business development perspective, but it feels like it's stealing your time. It's taking away from other activities. And there's some combination here of bouncing back and forth between overdoing it in panic mode and ignoring it completely when you're busy. And so there's a big problem if you don't know what enough is. And that's what I want to help you with on today's episode, is giving you a framework to define what is enough and to figure out, is that definition correct or not, and what to do when it isn't, and also how to over time reduce how much is required so that it isn't such a heavy lift in running your business. So many good things to talk through today. Specifically, the episode here, our agenda is going to be number 1, I will give you a companion resource. Number 2, we'll talk about the damage done by this question of what's enough, or how much is enough. Number 3, I'll give you a 5-part framework and walk through it in detail to define enough. And then we'll wrap up the episode with steps to put it into action. Okay, first, the companion resource that goes with this episode is the Business Dashboard 1-pager. You may not have downloaded this yet, or maybe it's been a while. Go download this at melissalieberman.com/KPI for Key Performance Indicator, KPI. And it will just give you a 1-pager where you can go in and put down the business metrics. We're going to define some of those here in a moment and give you a way to track them on a weekly basis. Or if you're on more of a monthly cadence, you can track them on a monthly basis over the course of this year. So this is the type of process that we want to get you to. So it's so much more clear, black and white, versus this nebulous question in your mind of, is it enough? All right, let's talk about the impact of leaving this question unanswered. Am I doing enough? If you don't define enough very clearly, again, we'll talk about what that is in a moment. But when you don't define that, then you either end up overdoing things, like constantly networking, constantly posting, constantly following up, constantly chasing conversations that don't matter, and still feeling behind. Because your brain is operating off of, I'm not doing enough. I'm not doing enough, which causes you to constantly try to do more. And when you're not physically, logistically, or mentally, or energetically able to do more, then you default to, if you're like most of us, then you default to criticizing yourself, right? It's not enough. I need to catch up. I'm behind. Those are the kinds of thought processes that are running your business. These are not valuable thought processes running your business and will definitely burn you out at some point. and not create the results that you're looking for either. Number two, it could look like you're underdoing it, right? When you don't know what enough is, you get yourself into confusion. I don't even know what enough is. It lets you off the hook in a way, in a strange way, right? When you tell yourself, I don't even know what enough is, and then generates confusion, then you work on something that you do know, which is client delivery, which is checking off things off of your list, doing admin. I was talking to a consultant the other day and she told me, I've been following my blocks. She blocked off some time every morning on her schedule when she knew she wouldn't be interrupted. And I asked her what she was doing in that. She's like, I still can't fit into business development. I said, what have you been doing in that time that you blocked off? And she said, I've been working on getting my list, all my action items under control so I don't feel so overwhelmed. And then I'll feel clearer to work on business development. I said, that will never happen. There's always going to be some fire. There's always going to be something you need to do for one of your clients or for your family or for yourself. There's always going to be something that feels like if I could just get this off my plate, then I can focus on business development. It's just a creative way of your brain distracting you from what really needs to happen, but it doesn't want to do. So when you don't know what enough is just this undefined concept in your business, and you end up underdoing it because of confusion, you end up hitting that same situation, which is scrambling to find clients and feast or famine, right? So this all has an obvious cost of impact to your pipeline, to your revenue, to your cash flow. These are obvious costs. But the other cost that isn't likely as evident that I want to point out to you is the cost of your mental cycles and your mental energy. When you're constantly having this thread in the back of your mind, I'm not doing enough, I need to do more, it won't be enough, what I'm doing isn't good enough, all of those variations, that is incredibly draining. That drains your confidence. That impacts everything that you do. That drains your energy. That impacts your capacity, right? Your ability to get more done more efficiently, more effectively, without it taking extra cycles. Having that thread going on in the back of your mind, which so many of us do, even I do it still, almost 14 years into this, it's incredibly important to understand the cost of it. It's not just the obvious costs, it's also these less obvious costs in terms of the drain it's putting on you and your ability to be effective as a consultant and as a business owner for your business. That's why it's so important to address this situation. This cannot go on. This cannot go on. You cannot keep asking yourself in an open loop, how much is enough? Am I doing enough? Or saying I'm not, just deciding it's not enough. I haven't done enough. This cannot continue. So that's why I want to highlight this 5-part framework for you here today in this episode to help you to address this. Here's the 5-part framework. I'm going to walk you through the 5 parts and then I'll come back and do one by one to drill into the details of it. So number 1 of the 5 parts, we want to redefine what enough actually means. And by that, you might be a little surprised by what I mean by that. So I'm using the word redefine for a reason. Redefine what enough actually means. Number 2, part 2 of this 5-part framework, you want to anchor enough to your revenue plan. Number 3, you want to follow through on a minimum operating standard. Number 4, you want to evaluate and adjust. And number 5, you want to reduce effort by improving quality. Think of this as a cycle. Now, all of these parts we'll put in the show notes. So when you come to the podcast player, you can scroll down toward the bottom and you'll see view full show notes. Click that, and then you'll be able to see all of this written out for you, these 5 parts. Okay, so we're going to drill into each one of these 5 for you so you know what they mean and you can start putting them into action here. So number 1, we want to redefine what enough actually means. For most of us, we think, what does this actually mean? Enough. We think it's how much is enough business development? Of course, that's part of it. But When we think about it that way, it's effort based thinking. We measure it in terms of how much time did I spend? Did I have 3 blocks of business development or 1 block of business development in a week? We might measure it in amount of messages that we sent or how busy we felt. Oftentimes, that's the one that we measure it by, right? Like, how busy did I feel this week? Did I do enough business development? I felt really busy because I went to an event. It must have been enough business development. Or I felt really busy because I had a speaking engagement. It must have been enough business development. That is effort based thinking. Owner based thinking is different. Enough mentally, enough isn't about how much time you spend, it's about whether your future revenue is protected. Enough ultimately is about whether your future revenue is protected. So here's a simple test you can ask yourself with respect to this. Here's a simple test that you can leverage to implement this for yourself. The question is, if your current project ended earlier than expected, would you already have conversations in motion? Not hopes, not vague intentions, but real conversations. And this is the first shift. It's mental. When we're redefining the mental side of what enough actually means. Step one. The definition of what enough is isn't as much as I can do. The definition of enough is, am I doing the things, the combination of quantity and activities that creates the result that I'm looking for? This is not trying to feel productive. This is you managing to your results. And thinking about enough is the first step of that. Number two, now when we think about what is enough, we want to anchor that to your revenue plan. On paper, if you're like a lot of consultants or those that I talk to, at least, you have a plan of some sort. You might have a revenue target. You might have a sense of how many clients you need. You might have a rough timeline of how those clients ideally would fit into your year and how the pricing looks. So all of that rolls up together. But this plan only works if you have a business development plan that is designed to support it. Otherwise, you have these high level targets, revenue, number of clients, pricing, but without drilling it into a level of detail, you will always have that open loop. How much is enough? Am I doing enough? This isn't enough. The business development plan has 2 parts. You have your business development metrics, what actually needs to happen, the quantity of things. And then you have that combined with the strategy and activities to hit those metrics. I'll give you an example. So this plan, your business development plan that enables, that fuels your revenue plan, you may figure out, okay, I need 10 conversations per month based on, your anticipated close rate, for example. I need about 10 conversations a month is my hypothesis. That's enough. The plan is not, I'm going to do more networking to create the 10 conversations. The plan is actually to create those conversations. I'm going to go to one event, like a local association, perhaps, or more a regional conference, whatever it is. I'm going to go to one event. I'm going to do one speaking engagement where I make a clear next step type offer, I call it a conversation starter offer. And then thirdly, I'm going to make 3 outbound networking calls. I'm going to schedule 3 outbound networking type meetings. When your business development isn't anchored to a plan like that, you know this, reality takes over. Your deals slip, you defer networking, you delay finding those speaking opportunities. And of course, suddenly you're scrambling because it wasn't that the plan was bad, it's that the activity wasn't aligned to the revenue plan. We need both. We need both. We need the revenue plan and the business development plan to fuel that. This is why random activity without those metrics never feels satisfying. It never feels like it's enough because we've never defined what enough is. So it's this moving target. Most of the time, the problem isn't like you don't have enough time to do business development. Let me say it this way. Most weeks, you do have time for business development. There are some where you don't. But most weeks you do have time for business development. You tell yourself I ran out of time for business development, if you're like so many of us. You do have time. It's that you aren't clear enough with yourself about how you're going to use that time and what is your definition of enough. And so you let yourself defer it by saying, oh, I don't have enough time, or being confused. I don't even know how to use my time. So that's why number two is so important, is anchoring enough to your revenue plan by having a business development plan that defines what is enough. Then the third step is to follow through on what we'll call a minimum operating standard. So in step two, you defined what exactly you're going to be doing and how much of it are you going to be doing, and your best hypothesis that rolls up to your revenue plan. Now in step three, this is about deciding what has to keep running no matter what, and doing that. For your minimum operating standard, so many times it's so common for consultants to default to more emotion based activity. I'll say it that way, where we are doing a lot when we're nervous and then nothing when we're busy, or almost nothing when we're busy, right? It becomes this emotion based activity versus having a minimum operating standard so that based on step two, how much activity you're doing and what type of activity that is. And then you know what the minimum operating standard is. So that every single week, no matter what, unless you're on vacation, you're executing that minimum operating standard. This is where you are treating your own business as non negotiable, just like you would treat your client work as non negotiable. You don't skip your client work. You don't ignore your client work. You don't justify not doing your client work. You don't procrastinate. You're capable of executing in this way. We need to apply it to your business as well. And that's the tool here, is having that concept of the minimum operating standard so that you know what's expected of you. You know what quote unquote enough is. So you don't have that open loops wondering, am I doing enough? And then you're following through with that. And set yourself a goal of doing that 80% of the time. This isn't about perfection, but it's certainly about doing it most of the time versus some of the time or none of the time. Now, this part is a caveat, and that is mind management. Even if you've done these first few steps, even if you've reset in your brain what enough means, even after you've built a business development plan that rolls up to your revenue plan, even after you've set the minimum operating standard and you're following through with it most of the time, even after you're doing all of those things, there's a high likelihood that your brain will still say it's not enough or question, is this enough? You're human, this is normal, but it's critical for you to notice where you're doing that, to not believe it, and redirect it to something like, listen, we have this under control. We being you and your consultant brain and your business owner brain, right? All of you working as one person. This is under control. We're confirming what enough is. We're doing enough based on our current hypothesis, and we're confirming what enough is. And we'll revisit this in 90 days or however long you want to kind of give yourself a runway here. Do you see? If there's anything about this episode, I really want to emphasize this, because don't let this be an open loop. How much is enough? Am I doing enough? What is enough? How much does someone else think enough is? We want to get rid of all of that by defining it. And also knowing that even after you define it, there's a high likelihood your brain's going to keep doing that questioning of you, because it knows, it's smart enough to know, if I keep questioning, is this enough? This isn't enough, that whole loop, that it will create analysis paralysis and you won't do anything. And it likes that. It feels like it won, because you don't have to do things that are uncomfortable or you don't like, or that have a lot of variability and unknowns to them. We don't want your brain to win. We don't want your lower brain to win anyway, right? We want your brain to win that knows exactly what it's doing, has it under control, and knows that it can adjust and pivot and tweak things when they need to be adjusted. That's all. So that's super important. Okay, now let's move on to the next step, which is step number 4. which is evaluating. Now, this is really important because in these first few steps, we've defined what is enough, the way we think about what is enough. We've defined an actual hypothesis about what is enough. We've put it into action and we've been set ourselves up to follow through. But you might be wrong. A lot of us are. We think that this amount of activity and this type of activity will be enough. That's our hypothesis. And we might be wrong. It's common to be wrong. You might be completely off base. You underestimated it entirely, or you might be slightly off base. That's not a problem. The only problem is that when you skip the step of setting a baseline for yourself, you have nothing to judge it against. You have nothing to evaluate it against. So get your head in the space of, you know what? I'm going to set a baseline and then I'm going to implement it and get myself enough data, which is through consistency, so that I can have enough data points to evaluate what's working and what's not from judgment, but from curiosity. What creates conversations for me, most effective conversations? What works best to move conversations forward? What creates stalls with conversations? What creates more traction? What creates momentum? What creates greater results with less effort? Those kinds of questions for yourself. But so many of us are afraid to fail and we have a fear of that failure. And so we just don't want to look at it. We just keep on the hamster wheel. I need to do more. I need to do more. No, you don't need to do more. We need to know what we're doing and how effective it is and how can we make it more effective. So if you're skipping this step of evaluation, the response is always going to be the same, which is criticism by yourself of yourself that you're not doing enough and some force in your mind that you need to do more to be successful. That's not helpful. So evaluation breaks that cycle. It turns business development from a pass fail and a I'm never doing enough type of a talk track into one that you have a clear hypothesis, a clear set of tests, and a clear process for adjusting, because there's always room for adjusting versus you've done something wrong. And over time, this is actually how you build not only a solid pipeline, not only an effective business development process, but also the confidence for yourself as a business owner, that you're a business owner that learns what works in your business, and you're the type of business owner who can figure out how to make things work for yourself. So many direct benefits as well as indirect benefits of this process. Okay, number 5. The 5th step here, which I find to be a bit of a light at the end of the tunnel. So if you're finding challenges along the way of, oh, this feels like a lot to figure out my hypothesis and test it, the light at the end of the tunnel is when you have this information, when you have the baseline, when you've executed against the baseline, when you've evaluated it and figured out areas for improvement, you're setting yourself up to reduce the effort by improving the quality. You have all of the inputs to enable yourself to do that. So once you're finally implementing those first 4 steps, you're setting yourself up to reduce the effort. It doesn't have to be a heavy lift ever, actually, but it might feel like a heavy lift, especially in the beginning, or perhaps if you're changing your pricing or you're changing the type of offers that you're offering, or maybe you're tightening down your ideal client profile. It might feel like a heavy lift for a while, but it can get easy for you. And knowing that you have this 5th step, which is reducing the effort by improving the quality. Because 2 consultants can spend the same amount of time on business development. Imagine that, right? This would be so common that a consultant would spend 4 hours a week on business development or 6 hours a week. You're spending the same amount of time as someone else. Why are they getting a different result than you are? It's not because they're working harder. It's the quality of the work. And those first 4 steps are setting you up to be in a position where you can set a goal of not doing more over time. As you're setting bigger goals for yourself, you're ready to have $1 million business or a $500,000 business or a 750K business. You don't have to do more to get there. You want to have the baseline and the understanding of how to generate demand and move that demand through the sales process in a way that's easier for you, so that you can hit those goals without them requiring you to do more. That's what this fifth step is that you have the clear answers to what is enough, what is the result of these inputs, these activities create these outcomes, and having a good understanding of that for yourself. Understanding what signals actually tell you when things are working and when they're not. That's all you need to know. But you do that by having those first 4 steps in place as a constant core business function. And then knowing that this 5th step, which is over time, the goal is that you're reducing the effort to generate leads. You're becoming sought after for what you do. People are coming to you, and you're reducing the amount of effort by improving the quality of the work you're doing to generate demand, and ultimately setting yourself up for a situation where answer to how much is enough is actually less than what you're doing right now. And you're able to achieve bigger and better goals. All right. So those are the 5 steps of this 5-step framework. Let's pull this all together for you so you can put it into action. First, I want to say this in a very simple way. Enough. The answer to how much is enough is not a feeling. It's a decision. I'll say it again. The answer to enough, am I doing enough business development, is not a feeling. It's a decision. It's not a feeling of being settled. It's not a feeling of under control or calm. It's a decision that I've decided this amount is enough. I'm going to implement it and get as many data points as possible as I implement so that I can revisit whether it's enough or maybe less is required or more is required or different is required. It's not a feeling, it's a decision. It's also redefining success away from effort toward protection, anchoring your actions to your revenue plan, maintaining that consistent baseline, evaluating instead of judging or just letting this open loop always happening. Am I doing enough? I'm not doing enough. And tightening the quality so that over time effort goes down, not up. If your business development is disappearing the moment that delivery gets busy, you do not have these in place. That is your warning. You want to get yourself, and the other warning is if you've got this constant talk track going on of, is this enough? This won't be enough. You want to get to the place where those things aren't tying you down, weighing you down, where you're paying the cost of those financially and mentally and emotionally, and watering down and diluting your ability to be successful. This is the 5-part framework and why it's so important for you to address this so that you can be so much more effective and achieve so much more than what you thought was possible for yourself in your business. So as we wrap up today's episode, what I encourage you to do is, number 1, go back through these 5 steps. Again, you can go to the full show notes, not the podcast player show notes, but the full show notes, and walk through the 5 steps that I've given you here today verbally. Walk through them for yourself. Don't skip them. Don't just kind of think to yourself, oh, I know what enough is. You want to document this. You want to implement it. You want to have the data points and that evaluation process so that you can then redecide how much enough is, and remind yourself as you go when your brain tries to trick you and say, we don't know how much enough is, or I don't know if I was right when I defined how much enough is. You'd redirect it to say, we've got that under control. We're implementing a hypothesis. We have a plan of when we're going to revisit it to see if it's working and adjust as necessary. So you don't have those open loops going in your mind and paying all those extra costs of the time and mental energy that it takes to be thinking about, am I doing enough? All right, my friend, I'm so glad you've been here for this episode. Go take those action items, and I'll go see you again next week. Take care.
Thanks for joining me this week on the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. If you liked today's episode, I have 3 quick next steps for you. First, click subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to make sure you don't miss future episodes. Next, leave me a review in your podcast app. so other independent consultants can find and benefit too. And finally, to put the ideas from today's episode into action, head over to melissalieberman.com for the show notes and more resources to help you grow your consulting practice from your first few projects into a full-fledged business. See you next week.